Hey there friends, welcome back to Epic African Tales by Toby. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single amazing story. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of the twins who learned their life lessons the hard way. Sit tight as I take you through the story of the cursed twins, Kumi and Ayo's heart-stopping journey to the Forbidden River.
In the village of Asamoah, nestled between lush valleys and misty mountains, lived a woman named Zora and her husband, Kumi. Their home, a sanctuary amidst the bustling village, was filled with hope yet shadowed by the ache of unfulfilled dreams. For years Zara had been pregnant multiple times, but each ended in miscarriage, leaving her desolate and heartbroken. Whispers of witchcraft from Kwame's family surrounded her like a curse, though Kwame, steadfast in his love, refused to abandon her. One evening, a powerful storm swept through the village, shaking the earth and sky. As the storm subsided, Zara went into labor. To the shock of the entire village, she gave birth to twins, a rarity that no one in Asamoah had ever witnessed. The twins, Ayo and Kumi, were celebrated as miracles, born under an omen of power and mystery. The villagers were in awe, believing the children held a destiny beyond what anyone could fathom. As Ayo and Kumi grew, their beauty and grace were evident, but something more stirred within them, an unseen force that set them apart. At first, their peculiarities were small. Ayo's laugh could lift a person's mood instantly, while Kumi's touch could ease the deepest pain. Yet, soon their abilities took on a darker edge. The twins could transfer pain, whether physical or emotional, between people with a mere glance. What had been seen as miraculous now began to breed fear. The villagers, once drawn to their charm, started to keep their distance. Gossip spread that the twins were cursed, not blessed. The enchantment that once surrounded them turned to suspicion and isolation, leaving the twins alone with their growing powers. And as the twins sought connection, their mother's cryptic warnings echoed in their minds: never go to the river of shadows. No good will come from its waters. The river of shadows lay just beyond the borders of Asamoah, winding through the ancient forest like a serpent hidden in the heart of the wilderness. Though the villagers feared it, they couldn't deny its allure. Legends whispered that the river was home to powerful spirits and that its waters could grant unimaginable power or curse those who dared to touch them. For Ayo and Kumi, the river's call became an obsession. As their isolation grew, they found solace only in each other. They spoke little of their pain, but both knew that their abilities had made them outcast. The once celebrated twins now lived in the shadows, their talents feared rather than admired. It wasn't long before the mystery of the Forbidden River began to dominate their thoughts. One fateful night, unable to resist the pull any longer, they snuck out of their home while Zora and Kwame slept. The moon hung low, casting long, eerie shadows across the forest path as the twins made their way toward the river. Every step they took brought them closer to the unknown, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. As they approached the river, a strange sensation washed over them. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the hum of ancient magic. The river glowed faintly, a shimmering ribbon of silver under the moonlight. It was beautiful, yet unsettling, as though it were alive, watching and waiting for them. Kumi knelt by the water's edge, mesmerized by the soft glow. Ayo stood behind her, the warnings of their mother playing over in her mind like a distant echo. "We shouldn't be here," Ayo whispered, but even she couldn't tear her eyes away from the mesmerizing sight before them. Without another word, Kumi dipped her hand into the river. A chill shot through her, but it wasn't painful, it was invigorating, as though the river was breathing life into her veins. Encouraged, Ayo followed suit, plunging her hand into the water as well. For a moment, they felt an overwhelming sense of power, as if the river itself was sharing its secrets with them. But in that instant, everything changed. The water swirled violently around their hands, pulling them in deeper. A surge of fear rose in Ayo's chest, and she tried to pull away, but it was too late. The river had them in its grasp. The twins' bodies were lifted off the ground as the water coiled around them, enveloping them in a shimmering cocoon of liquid light. They tried to scream, but no sound came out. The river's power surged through them, transforming their very essence. In the blink of an eye, Ayo and Kumi were no longer human. They had become creatures of the water, their forms shifting into the sleek, glistening bodies of fish. As the twins struggled to comprehend what had happened, the river quieted, releasing them into its depths. For the first time in their lives, they were separated. Ayo was swept downstream, disappearing into the darkness, while Kumi was left near the shore, gasping for breath as she floundered in the water. The twins had crossed the line, and the river of shadows had claimed its prize. Kumi gasped for air as she fought to stay afloat, her body sleek with the shimmering essence of the river. She could no longer feel her legs or arms. Her form was that of a fish, sleek and agile, but her mind remained her own. Panic surged through her as she looked around, searching for Ayo. The river seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions, its dark waters hiding whatever lay beneath. Ayo, she cried out, though no sound escaped her lips, only bubbles rising to the surface. But Ayo was nowhere to be seen. The water had taken her sister, and Kumi was left alone, floundering in this strange new form. Her heart raced as she tried to make sense of what had happened. The river had changed them both, but why? What was the purpose of this transformation? Just as fear threatened to overwhelm her, Kumi felt a shift in the water. The river began to glow again, but this time, the light was softer, more welcoming. Out of the depths, a figure began to emerge, a tall, graceful woman with flowing robes that shimmered like the river itself. Her eyes were dark and ancient, filled with a wisdom that seemed to stretch beyond time. Kumi's heart pounded as the figure approached, her presence commanding yet gentle. The woman knelt by the water's edge, her gaze softening as she looked upon Kumi. "Child of the river," the woman spoke, her voice like the whisper of a breeze across the water. "You and your sister have entered a place that is both sacred and forbidden. I am Sarah, the guardian of these waters." Kumi tried to speak, but no words came. She could only stare up at Sarah, her fish body trembling under the weight of the guardian's gaze. "You were warned, and yet you came," Sarah continued, her tone filled with a quiet sadness. "Now, the river has claimed one of you." A sharp pain shot through Kumi's heart at the mention of her sister. Ayo was gone, lost to the river's depths. Tears filled her eyes, but they were lost in the water around her. "Where is she?" Kumi wanted to scream, but Sarah answered the question in her mind. "Ayo has been taken into the river's embrace," the guardian said, her gaze turning toward the distant stretch of the water. "She has become one with its power, a part of its endless current. But you, Kumi, were spared. The river has chosen to return you." Kumi's mind reeled. Return her? What did that mean? And why was Ayo taken while she remained? Sarah rose to her feet, her expression unreadable. "There is a balance in all things, Kumi. The river saw the strength in your sister and claimed her as its own. You, however, are meant to carry on in the world of the living." Kumi's heart shattered. Ayo was gone, and there was nothing she could do to bring her back. The weight of her loss pressed down on her, suffocating in its intensity. How could she return to the village without her sister? How could she face their parents with this burden? But Sarah's next words cut through her grief like a blade. "There is still a way for you to honor Ayo," the guardian said softly. "The river has not taken her completely. In time, you will come to understand the gift she has given you. But for now, you must return to your village. Your journey is not yet over." With a gentle wave of her hand, Sarah touched the water's surface, and Kumi felt a powerful current lift her up. Her body began to change once more, the scales of her fish form fading as her human limbs returned. She gasped for air, her lungs filling with breath as she was gently placed on the riverbank, back in her own body. Kumi lay there, trembling and soaked, staring at the dark waters of the river that had taken her sister. The village of Asamoah loomed in the distance, but it felt like a world away. How could she return without Ayo? How could she ever face the village again? But deep inside, Kumi felt the faintest spark of something else, something Sarah had called a gift. Though she didn't understand it yet, she knew that her sister's story wasn't over. And neither was hers. With unsteady hands, Kumi pushed herself off the riverbank. The night was still heavy around her, and the air clung to her skin like a damp cloak. She glanced one last time at the river of shadows, hoping against hope that she might see a sign of Ayo, a ripple, a whisper, anything to tell her that her sister was still close. But the river was silent. Her heart ached, but she knew she couldn't stay. The village would be waking soon, and she had to return before anyone discovered her absence. As she walked back along the forest path, Kumi felt different. Her body had been restored, but something inside her had shifted. Her connection to the river pulsed faintly beneath her skin, like a quiet hum that only she could hear. Though she didn't fully understand it, she sensed that Sarah's words held truth. Ayo's story wasn't over, and neither was hers. When Kumi finally emerged from the forest, she saw the faint glow of dawn breaking over Asamoah. The village stood still, peaceful in the early morning light. But as she approached, a sense of dread began to creep in. How would she explain what had happened? Would anyone believe her if she told them the truth? And how could she bear to face her parents without Ayo by her side? Her legs grew heavier with every step, her mind racing with fear and uncertainty. But something inside her, some quiet strength that hadn't been there before, pushed her forward. She had survived the river, and though she was alone now, she had to keep going, for herself, for her parents, and for Ayo. As Kumi crossed the threshold of her home, she paused, listening to the faint sounds of the village waking up. Life in Asamoah would go on, just as it always had. But Kumi knew that for her, everything had changed. And deep down, she could feel that something in the village had changed as well. The journey back to Asamoah felt like an eternity for Kumi. Every step dragged her deeper into the reality of what had happened by the river. Her sister, Ayo, was gone, claimed by the river of shadows, while she was left behind with a strange new connection she barely understood. The familiar path to the village now seemed foreign, and every rustle in the trees made her heart race. By the time she reached the village, the first light of dawn was creeping over the horizon. The village of Asamoah had just begun to stir, with villagers waking to tend to their daily tasks. Kumi hesitated at the entrance of the village, unsure of how to move forward. What would she tell them? How could she explain that her sister had been taken by the river? Kumi's parents, Zara and Kwame, were outside their home, their faces filled with worry. They had been awake all night, wondering where their daughters had gone. When they saw Kumi approaching alone, drenched and disheveled, their worry turned to fear. Kumi. Zara ran toward her daughter, her hands trembling as she gripped Kumi's shoulders. Where have you been? Where is Ayo? Kumi's throat tightened, the words catching in her chest. How could she tell them the truth? How could she tell them that Ayo was gone, taken by the river's magic, lost forever beneath its depths? Tears welled in her eyes, but she forced herself to speak. She's gone, Kumi whispered, her voice barely audible. The river, it took her. Zara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Kwame, who had always been the steady one, staggered back in shock, his face paling. They both knew the legends of the River of Shadows, the stories that had been passed down for generations. But never had they imagined their own children would be swept up in its curse. The weight of the loss hung heavy in the air, but there was nothing more to be said. The villagers would soon learn of what had happened, and Kumi knew they would look at her differently now. She was no longer just one of the twin daughters of Asamoah. She was the girl who had returned from the Forbidden River while her sister had been taken. But deep inside, Kumi felt something stir, something quiet yet powerful. The river had changed her, and though she didn't fully understand it yet, she knew that Ayo's presence hadn't entirely vanished. The connection they shared still pulsed faintly beneath her skin. Kumi looked toward the horizon, her heart heavy with grief but also filled with resolve. She would find a way to honor Ayo's memory and understand the river's gift, no matter what the village thought of her. Days passed, and the village mourned the loss of Ayo. The once bustling home of Zora and Kumi was now filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of the wind through the trees. Kumi found herself retreating from the villagers, avoiding their sympathetic glances and whispered conversations. She couldn't bear their pity, and she certainly couldn't bear their fear. But as Kumi wandered the outskirts of the village, her mind kept drifting back to the river. The power she had felt in its waters, the strange connection to Ayo, was still there, tugging at her heart like a distant song she couldn't ignore. One evening, Kumi found herself drawn to the edge of the forest, just beyond the village's borders. The river was far away, hidden deep within the ancient woods, but she could feel its presence as if it were right beside her. She knelt by a small stream that trickled through the trees, her fingers trailing through the cool water. As she closed her eyes, the faint hum of the river's magic surged through her, filling her with warmth and light. She could feel Ayo, her sister's spirit, alive and vibrant within the river's current. The river had taken Ayo, but it hadn't destroyed her. Instead, it had transformed her into something more, something powerful and eternal. In that moment, Kumi understood. The river hadn't taken Ayo as a punishment. It had chosen her, seen the strength in her spirit, and made her part of something greater. Ayo wasn't lost. She was part of the river now, guiding its flow, watching over the village from the depths of its waters. Kumi's heart swelled with a mixture of grief and awe. Ayo's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. And though she missed her sister terribly, she knew that Ayo would always be with her, flowing through the currents of the river, connected to her in a way that transcended life and death. The river had given Kumi a gift, an unbreakable bond with Ayo and a new understanding of the world around her. It was a gift she would carry with her for the rest of her life. As time passed, Kumi began to heal. The pain of losing Ayo never fully left her, but she learned to live with it, finding solace in the knowledge that her sister was part of something greater. The villagers, too, slowly began to accept what had happened. Though they still feared the river, they no longer saw Kumi as cursed. Instead, they viewed her as a protector, someone who had survived the river's magic and returned with its blessing. Kumi's parents, Zora and Kumi, found comfort in their daughter's strength. Though they mourned the loss of Ayo, they saw a new light in Kumi, an inner peace that hadn't been there before. Kumi spent her days helping her parents and tending to the village, but every evening, she would wander to the edge of the forest, listening for the river's call. The connection she felt to the water grew stronger with each passing day. She could sense Ayo's presence more clearly now, guiding her, whispering to her through the currents of the river. Kumi knew that her journey wasn't over. The river had more to teach her, and she would continue to honor Ayo's memory by embracing the gift the river had given her. One evening, as Kumi stood at the edge of the stream, she felt a sudden surge of warmth in her chest. The faint hum of the river's magic grew louder, filling her with a sense of purpose. She knelt by the water's edge, dipping her fingers into the cool stream, and as she did, a soft voice whispered in her mind. "Kumi." It was Ayo. Her voice was clear and strong, as though she were standing right beside her. "I'm with you," Ayo whispered. "Always." Tears filled Kumi's eyes, but they were tears of joy. She smiled, her heart swelling with love and gratitude. The river had taken Ayo, but it had also given her back in a way that was more profound than Kumi could have ever imagined. As she rose to her feet, Kumi looked out over the horizon, her spirit filled with a new sense of peace. The village of Asamoah was her home, but the river was her destiny. And as long as the river flowed, Ayo would be with her, guiding her every step of the way. Kumi took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the river's magic in her veins. She was no longer afraid. The river had given her the strength to move forward, and with Ayo by her side, she knew that anything was possible. And so, with a heart full of love and hope, Kumi stepped into the future, ready to embrace whatever the river had in store for her.
Don't forget to share your experience in the comments below. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more intriguing stories like this one. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next episode.